Welcome to the Education and Empowerment Podcast. In this show, our hosts explore success and advancement through education by interviewing today's top leaders in the fields of education, business, and technology in order to provide insight into what it really takes to succeed. All right, let's get into the show.
Hello and welcome. This is Bakhtiyor, your host for the show. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Martyn Miller, Assistant Vice President of International Affairs at Temple University and a Chairman of StudyPA, a consortium of higher education institutions in Pennsylvania. As Assistant Vice President for International Affairs at Temple University, Dr. Miller oversees international services, cultural activities division, which includes the Center for American Language and Culture, the Confucius Institute, International Student Affairs, and International Student Services, Scholar and Student Services. Since joining Temple in 1999, Dr. Miller has at various times also headed global programs and international admissions, international marketing and communication, and has also taught an intellectual heritage program at University Seminar Global Citizenship. Prior to joining Temple University in 1999, as a Director of International Student and Scholar Services, Dr. Miller was Department Head at University of Georgia American Language Program. Dr. Miller holds master and doctoral degrees in fantasy and medieval English literature from University of Georgia and a bachelor's degree with distinction in English literature and teaching diploma in English as a foreign language from American University of Beirut. Dr. Miller has held leadership positions in such organizations as Georgia Association of International Educators, Georgia TESOL, NAFSA, National Association of Foreign Student Advisors, the Pennsylvania Council of International Education, TESOL, and currently serves as inaugural Chair of StudyPA. As an Arab American, Dr. Miller grew up in Syria and Lebanon and has lived in the United States since graduating from American University Beirut. In this podcast, Dr. Miller will share his insights about creating successful international student programming that sets international students and scholars for success outside of the classroom. You will learn from someone well experienced both as a scholar, but also a leader who ran some of the most successful international programs and internationalization efforts with higher education institutions in Pennsylvania. Welcome to the show, Dr. Miller. I am very thrilled and excited to have you.
Bakhtiyor, thank you very much for having me. It will be a pleasure to speak about these topics today.
Fantastic, thank you. So for starters, I'd like to give our audience a chance to get to know you a little bit closer. So could you tell us how you get started into the field and what perhaps influenced you to get into academia and international higher education?
I must admit that my entry into the field is much more accidental than intentional. As you were reading my bio, and thank you very much for that, you might have noticed that my degrees are in fantasy and medieval English literature, which are not usually associated with international education. As it happens, I had just finished my oral comprehensives for the PhD and was literally walking in a hallway, and I saw somebody and I said, "Hey, I just finished my exams. Do you have a job?" And it was the head of the language for the University Language Program. He said, "I'll call you in a couple of weeks." He called me in 2 weeks. I was granted a full-time faculty position based on bumping into him in the hallway. 6 months later, he told me that he was leaving for another position and wanted to know if I wanted to become department head. So literally, it was accidental, certainly not an intentional thing. My degrees are, I guess that the fact that I have degrees in literature gives me some ability to read, to think about problems in a way maybe some different from somebody who might have a more traditional academic background in this field in political sciences or international relations or things like that. Right. I don't think of it as a detriment, but it certainly is not the normal way of getting in. As far as international itself, I was born to it. Again, I was raised in the Middle East. My father was an educator from 1946 until 1986, actually until much later than that even. My grandparents actually met at Temple in the 1915s, and I did not know that until after I got the job at the university. So academia is who I am, or is part of what I am, I should say, yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So years later, would you recommend yourself to go into higher education? Imagine you were in
Absolutely.
your 20s, and would you have recommended yourself to do that?
I have absolutely no regrets for having chosen this field, for having pursued this field. In fact, I don't know what I would do if I were not in academia, Bakhtiyor. It's literally all it's what I've known my whole life. I was born on a university campus. I was raised on a university campus, and my whole life has been on university campuses. So no regrets whatsoever, and I would highly recommend it to anybody. It is exceptionally rewarding, I think, not financially. So if you're looking for money, academia is not where to go, but if you're looking for satisfaction, if you're looking for intellectual stimulation, if you're looking for the opportunity to work with some of the best students in the world, absolutely, academia is the way to go.
Amazing. I'm glad you say that because, looking back at my own, involvement as an international educator, I get interested in international education, but over time, it was more into youth development and how, international education is impacting global citizenship and, cultural exchanges. And, one of the things later on I discovered was, social entrepreneurship. So not only the money part of things, but how do we find that balance between money and that satisfaction, and I really became interested in social entrepreneurship and have been practicing social entrepreneurship for some time now. And one of the things that I'm interested in, and I'm sure our audience will benefit from hearing, is how do we set students for success, not just on campus, but how do we set programming that is impacting student success outside of classrooms? So if you want to share with us, a couple of your thoughts and ideas into what are some of the things that you see important for, helping students succeed outside of classroom, that would be great.
As far as preparing them for employment in the future, I think the first and most important thing to do is to begin to advise them at the outset. We have many students who come to us as freshmen, and they're confused about what they want to be. I understand that at 16, 17, 18 years old, somebody is not going to have chosen his or her profession. However, if we at the university begin to advise them, even from the first time they step on our campus, that career is what they need to be thinking about and planning for as early as the freshman year. That's a good place to start. But it is not only, our responsibility is not only to give them that advice, but also to give them the tools so they can begin planning their own career path as early as, again, the freshman year. And what does that mean? At Temple, for example, we were able to partner rather closely with our career center. And so our Office of International Student Affairs and our Office of International Student Scholar Services, both of them work collaboratively with the Career Center and offer programs for our students as early as the first orientation. So, we introduce them to the Career Center staff. We let them know that the Career Center is there. And we also work with the Career Center to ensure that they are familiar with the special intricacies, if you will, of being an international student in the United States. There are so many visa issues that one needs to be aware of. We can't just say that an international student is eligible for all the same internship opportunities, for example, as a domestic student or a permanent resident. They have limitations. So you have to have a career center that's aware of that and sensitive to that, and also that is willing to provide resources to work around that. So our career center, for example, does work with employers, potential employers who are willing to engage international students, not only at the internship level under CPT, curricular practical training, that the F1 status that allows you to work while you're in school, but even beyond that, so post-completion, optional practical training, and better than that, sponsorship for the H-1B visa and potentially permanent residency. So if I have a career center that brings only employers that are not looking for international students, how does that benefit my international students? It doesn't. Sure. But again, it has to be an intentional part an intentional behavior, if you will, by the Career Center to seek out those employers who will invite international students to participate in the fairs and to employ them when the time comes. So beginning, again, at the beginning, if you will, and encouraging students that this is the time to start. Again, as I said, when you're 16, 17, 18, you're not thinking about a career. But when you're 22, it's too late to start thinking about it. In your final semester of your senior year, you have to begin laying the groundwork from the beginning. So working with a Career Center, for example. Something else that we do in our office is create employment opportunities for our students so that when they're done, they have a CV already, or a curriculum vitae, that they can show they have actually done meaningful work with something like the Office of International Affairs. And not only our office, but again, in conjunction with the Career Center, we were able to develop 5 internships devoted around the campus specifically to international students. So it's a big campus. 5 does not seem like a large number, but if you think about it, if we didn't have those 5 before, this is 5 brand new opportunities that international students are eligible to seek out. So not only have a Career Center that understands the needs of the international student, but also sensitize other offices on campus through such things as creating internships, funding the internships, placing them in other offices on campus so that the students have these opportunities. I'm not sure if you're aware, but the Temple Tea is a perfect example of how we empower our students for career, if you will. It was the Temple Tea is a very famous logo now, and it was developed not by a marketing firm or anything like that. It was in fact Temple students who were responding to a competition set by the president at the time, President Leocoris, to find a new logo for the university. And again, he went to students because he believed at the time that that's where the greatest creativity comes from. You can see it, your audience cannot because they're on audio only, but my tie, for example, is created by a Temple student who was employed at the Office of International Affairs. So again, when we create assets, or gifts or whatever it is, we use our students for their creativity. Most of the publications that we have are created by students, international students and domestic students. So again, what I'm getting at is we have to give them the opportunity to become professional while they are still students, so that when they go into the world, they have portfolios they can present or a CV that they can present. And that's what I think that we're doing successfully at our university. And we're not unique. I'm not going to say we're unique, but I do think that all of my team is intentional about the result. It's how we get the student to be successful.
Amazing, amazing. That's really great, and I'm glad you mentioned about the groundwork and the foundational aspects. In fact, in our previous episode, I had the opportunity to speak with Dr. Matthew Sheng. He's the president of Virginia Foundation of Independent Colleges and also ex-president of Marymount University. Where he shared his experience. So one of the things we talked about with him was the foundational aspects of student success. And right now, what I'm hearing is, you're bringing an example of how career services are important. Do you mind elaborating a little bit more, maybe just for the purposes of, broader understanding of, what does, success outside of classroom mean to you? Like, are there any secret sauces, along with career services that, you'd like to share or, we should know about?
Absolutely. Well, yes. On a campus as large as Temple's, for example, or most university campuses, there are opportunities for students to participate in leadership roles through student associations, through clubs. And in our case, for example, we have something called the International Student Advisory Board. So it's a group of 15 students. I think 14 of them are international, and one is a domestic student who's interested in international affairs. And so they serve on a board that advises our Office of International Affairs. This is providing them leadership opportunities that at the same time, they're mentored by the director and the assistant director of the Office of International Affairs, Student Affairs. So they begin to understand what leadership is. They're serving as the mouthpieces, if you will, for the 3,000 international students that we have. They're representing them, so they have to learn how to do that. This is not an employment opportunity. They're not getting paid for it. It's a volunteer service that they provide, but they recognize how this will be beneficial for them in the future. Again, building a resume doesn't necessarily mean that I'm getting paid for every line on my resume. A lot of it is volunteer. And that, as you were saying earlier, social entrepreneurship. One of the things that our students, unfortunately, are not always aware of is the value and possible future economic value of doing things now that you're not getting paid for. The volunteer opportunities that are available in the United States, and I understand growing across the world now, are essential for students to take advantage in. So again, Temple has, we have community service opportunities for students to participate in, and we encourage them to do that. There's, again, like every other university in the United States, I would imagine that Martin Luther King Day is usually celebrated by community service. It's not just a day off to go sit. It's actually a day to remind you that you should be participating in the community. Something as, I know this might be politically charged, but our students will also, for example, Temple students participated very much in Black Lives Matter events earlier this year. I know that, again, it's a politically charged issue, but if you're participating in these sorts of leadership opportunities in these organizations, Black Lives Matter, student associations, volunteer opportunities around the city that you're living in, all of these will show your potential employers what kind of person you are. Right. And it is the responsibility, I think, of the university, not only to provide opportunities, but to encourage students to participate in these extracurricular activities. I mean, we also have, I could go on with several other things, but I think that should be enough for now. Students too often think that their success is based on the grades that they get in the classes. And they have to understand that there's so much more than that. There's so much more they can give. There's so much more they can offer than just those good grades.
That's right. That's right. So for our listeners who are, professionals in the field of international education, as well as, international student and scholar services, I want to point out, and one of the things, I'm excited about is the fact that, Pennsylvania is a hub for, higher education in the United States. In fact, international students are taking notice, and according to NAFSA, Pennsylvania ranks 6th in the nation for, international student recruitment, and international students and scholars contribute over 2.1 billion to the state's economy, and international student, enrollment supports over 28,000 jobs in Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania, does really well, and namely Temple University that you mentioned. So I'm glad you're sharing those practices, in Temple University. So, and we understand that, competition is very high. So through StudyPA, could you elaborate a little bit more how you planning to support internationalization of campuses, as well as like attracting international students and retaining them, and hopefully, supporting them to be successful outside of classroom? What programming are you anticipating? Why did you create StudyPA in the first place? We'd like to learn more about that.
I'm embarrassed to say that StudyPA is the 35th study state consortium created in the United States. So that means 34 other states are much more ahead than we are on this, despite the fact that we are the 6th largest international student population in the United States. Or maybe we became complacent that we have so many universities in our state, and we've attracted so many international students that we didn't need to do anything. Well, I think that complacency began to be questioned, if you will, when numbers of international students started to fall in the United States. I mean, as you know, you've looked at the statistics, and you know that the U.S. was able to benefit from large numbers of international students coming to the U.S., contributing to our economy. You said, for example, Pennsylvania is $2.something billion of new money, specifically because of international students in the last year. The United States alone, the United States as a whole, realizes $43 billion of new funding. It's the 6th largest service export in the United States, international students. People don't think of that. So my point is that up until 2016, much of the country was not very intentional in its recruiting because international students just came. There was, It was the primary destination. It, of course, remains the primary destination by percentage and all that. But up until about 2016, we were getting international students without much effort. Then we started to see a decline in the number of international students applying for universities in the US. Small declines, but they began for the first time. And as that time continued, the numbers fell. And then, of course, as you know, right now, 2020, the numbers have fallen dramatically, as primarily as a result of COVID. But I also think it's because of actions taken by other countries, specifically other English-speaking nations, Canada, the United Kingdom, New Zealand, Australia, all of them, not only nationally, but even regionally, participated in something like what we would call StudyPA. They came together, they created unified messaging to begin to encourage international students from around the world not to think only of the United States, but also to see the opportunities available, in many cases, even closer than the US to them.
Correct.
The US did not have a national messaging in a similar way. As I said, 34 other states had realized this and then formed their own consortia. PA did not. So I think that the time came finally in 2018. The pain, if you will, was felt. And it was, that we all realized that we needed to do something to stem the losses and to begin to encourage larger numbers of students to look at the state of Pennsylvania. One of the things that we realized is that Pennsylvania has so much to offer within the state itself. Not only just Pennsylvania, something like the city of Philadelphia. We have over 60 colleges and universities in the metropolitan statistical area of the city of Philadelphia. Yet none of us have worked together to encourage students to apply to each other, if you will. Because if I have a student, I'm at Temple, I have partnerships with the majority of the community colleges in the region of Philadelphia. Does it not help me in the future if I encourage a student to consider applying to Delaware County Community College, for example? He might not be able to afford Temple right now, but he could afford Delaware County. So I could tell him about our partnership with Delaware County. He could go there for 2 years and then immediately come to Temple, saving himself a large amount of money, getting an excellent education in those first 2 years, all of which transfers to Temple.
Right.
So why would I not do that? Why would I not collaborate with my partner at Delaware County Community College so that both of us benefit? And that's really what StudyPA is. It is an ability for all of us to bring to pool, if you will, our resources so that we can all benefit from each other's efforts. Right. I'm not going into this to be in competition with other schools. The opposite. I and all of the other members of StudyPA are doing this to collaborate with each other so that the whole will benefit. And in the end, who is the primary beneficiary of this? The international student.
Exactly.
Because we're giving them the opportunity to come here. And we're opening, the door to Temple might be closed for Bakhtiyor, but the door to Bucks County, for example, might be open. So let's open that door for him. It's not my place to close it. It's my place to open it for you. If that makes any sense.
It makes total sense. In fact, this is very empowering, what you say. And a lot of the leaders that I'm speaking with these days, we talk about empowerment and leadership and collaboration and partnership. So the example that you brought is a very good lesson learned. I was curious to learn, maybe take a step back, from that. Can you maybe walk us through what are some of the challenges you've encountered along the, establishment of StudyPA? I mean, you certainly looked at making one institution successful, but now you're shifting to make, state successful. Can you share any lessons learned that are important that, you think other listeners will also, benefit from learning of, like, challenges that are out there that you're solving, right? So one of the challenges that you solved is turning competition into opportunity, into collaboration. Are there any other challenges that you'd like to share with us?
Frankly, the greatest challenge in creating StudyPA was in encouraging other universities to participate in this effort and not see it as competition. That's really what it came down to. I mean, we did not have the need for it before.
I see.
Because we were all benefiting from our individual efforts. I don't think we even realized the strength of the collaboration, the strength of our efforts if we collaborated.
Right.
And as I said, 34 other states had seen it. So why we didn't, I don't know. I can't, but once we were able to, just have 3 or 4 schools come together, literally that's what it was. The first meeting was just 3 or 4 schools. And we presented to each other this concept of why not? So that might be the greatest challenge, is answering the question, why not? There really is no reason not to do this. So it's asking our colleagues to take a leap of faith, if you will, going into a recruiting, because that's really what this is in the end. It's a way of recruiting international students, recruiting ourselves to work together and all that. So it is greatly our marketing and recruiting tool. So just asking them to think of this in a different way. We are not, and I know that the last year has been exceptionally challenging for the whole world. But I think that one of the greatest lessons all of us have learned is that we're only going to get through this or any other similar problem through collaboration.
That's amazing. That's very inspiring, and it's certainly a great lesson. I want to touch base a little bit on, the pandemic and the COVID. There's so much conversation out there, but moving forward as an institution, Temple University, or as a whole, as a consortium of, colleges, universities representing the state of Pennsylvania, what opportunities do you see in creating, international student programming that, impacts students to be successful outside of classroom?
One of the direct results of this past year has been the creation of a new campaign, recruiting campaign, if you will, that the Temple is starting, that focuses on the success of international students and immigrants. So that's not just international students, but international students and immigrants who have come to the United States, and we are demonstrating how their coming to the U.S. has been beneficial to the U.S. as a whole. And the reason I mention this is 2 of the examples that we're using in this campaign are founders or contributors to the COVID vaccine. So for example, Lebanese Armenian is the co-founder of Moderna. Moderna, of course, is one of the 2 first companies that did the vaccine. One of the primary, from what I understand, one of the primary research contributions came from a Temple graduate, for example. So I think that what we need to show is that even in a time of crisis as this, or maybe even especially in a time of crisis as this, the international student contributions, the immigrant contributions are invaluable, literally invaluable. And so I think it's important for us as US institutions to take this time to remind the rest of the country, remind the world of what education is able to do to overcome problems like this. I think it's only through education, it's only through research, it's only through, again, collaboration that the country was able within 9 months to create something that normally would take 5 to 10 years, and in some cases still has not even been done. So
that's
great. I don't know if that gets to your point, but I think, crisis, responding to the crisis in a successful way. I think
that's great. So for responding to crisis, would you consider collaboration, virtual work, technology, outsourcing, anything related to, other type of support like housing? Or, I know that a lot of institutions, students had to move out of their dorms, and a lot of students, needed, mental support or wellness support. Do you mind sharing your 2 cents on importance of technology, outsourcing, and supporting students, whether they were on campus or off campus?
Well, I do know, specific to the issues of mental health, international students, as you know, are usually less likely to disclose issues of mental distress or mental health However, they are just as likely to suffer from them as any other student in the United States.
Right.
COVID laid an extra layer to that, or put an extra layer on top of that, because while the domestic student could just pick up a phone, if you will, at any time of the day or night and call his mother, call her mother, our international students did not always have that opportunity. They don't have the support system here in the US that our domestic students or permanent resident students have. So
Right.
it becomes incumbent upon the institution not to serve as a parent. Absolutely not. We should, I don't think we should ever be in the role of in loco parentis, but
True.
we do need to be in the role of the support system. So again, International Student Affairs in my office was able to convince our Tuttleman counseling services to create a time specifically for international students. So there is a period once a week that international students can call in, and it is technology based, absolutely.
That's great.
Technology based, but they can call in, and it's not a therapy session, it's just a time to sit and talk with other people who are in a similar situation with you, guided by a professional who, again, who knows how to guide such conversations. So yes, our mental health services did have to do that.
That's great.
Another example, and this is very, very recent, right now that there's a situation in Burma, right, in Myanmar.
Mhm.
So many of us have students in Myanmar who are enrolled and who are taking classes, remotely because of the travel issues, of course. And we learned a couple of days after the most recent civil unrest that internet access might be taken away. As
Right.
we now know, it has been. It's been severely restricted, and that there have been cyber laws put in place that make it very difficult for the students to participate as actively as they would. So our university, and I'm sure any other university that was asked to make these accommodations, was able, in anticipation of these problems, to provide students with the reassurance that they would not suffer this semester financially or academically as a result of circumstances far, far, far beyond their control.
True.
So my office, the academic units, the registrar's office, our bursar's office, all of us came together in support of these students because we recognize that there is this unique need. And is it COVID specifically? No, a military coup or whatever we want to call it. I'm not sure what it's technically called, but the civil unrest right now in Burma is not specific to COVID. But is it exacerbated by COVID? Absolutely.
True.
Is it our responsibility to make sure that the students don't suffer? Absolutely. Even though they're not on our campus right now, they're still our students and they're still our responsibility. So that's just another example of how we can rally our forces, if you will, to
Sure.
come out in support of the student outside of the classroom. Of course, in that example, the faculty were advised, and they also are willing to make accommodations to the students so that they don't suffer academically.
Exactly. I want to touch a little bit on the accommodation part. And, Forstay, we are very excited to partner with StudyPA to hopefully help, institutions in Pennsylvania with accommodation services, right? Like helping them transform their on and off campus housing. So, which is also a very integral part of the student support and engagement and, student success. But one of the things I noticed, in Inside Higher Ed article recently, there has been a growth for graduate programs. And it's interesting because you would think, with pandemia and everything, it's going to be difficult. People will not, embrace education or anything. But I see a lot of, improvement there. And, there will be people, wishing to pursue careers similar to yours. Do you have any words of wisdom or maybe any advice for people wanting to go into international education or, supporting international students and scholars as we kind of head on to 2021 and, other years?
Words of advice, I don't know. I would say that an individual who gets into this field needs to have an ability to empathize with the students, an ability to understand where the student is coming from, not only physically or geographically, but also emotionally, intellectually, and be able to understand that the student is more than just the transcript. Again, I said this earlier, and even our students think that their whole worth is in the transcript, their grades. There's so much more to the student than just that. And that's what any educator, it's not just an international educator, I'm sorry, it's any educator needs to understand that the whole student is the person whom we serve. And that's another thing. Coming into international education, it is a service unit. It's a service profession. If you're looking to gain your own value or gain something from it individually, no, it's your students. Your success is only, this is pithy, I know, but our success as international educators or any educator is solely reflected in the student's success. If students don't succeed, then there's really no reason for us to be here. And that's, that should be the motivation, is the student success.
That's great. That's good. That's certainly good and very inspirational. As we wrap up our episode, and as a tradition, I want to see if you have any student empowerment quote or any piece of wisdom, for me or for our listeners out there before you go.
Again, a quote or something, no, but what I would encourage any student to do is remember that the most important academic endeavor is to find the right question. Look for the right question and you're going to find the answer. Again, going back to this whole idea of grades. Grades reflect, if you will, your ability to give the answers that the teacher wants. It doesn't, they don't reflect your ability to ask the right question. And you'll be successful if you can ask the right question. Other people will be successful if you can give them back their answer. But only you will be successful if you find your right question and find that answer. So look for the right question.
That's a great piece of advice. So starting with a question. Dr. Miller, thank you so much. I really appreciate, on behalf of Forstay, we appreciate, the opportunity to speak with you. Once again, thanks for listening and joining me today. And, thanks for sharing your insights and tips about international student and scholar success empowerment. I'm sure your stories will be heard and they will impact many people, and we look forward to the partnership and bringing more students and supporting them. For our listeners out there, make sure you subscribe to our podcast on podcast.forstay.com so you never miss an episode. And once again, thanks for Forstay for sponsoring this podcast. If you're curious about what Forstay does, check it out on podcast.forstay.com. Until our next show, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bakhtiyor, and thank you for the support of StudyPA.
Thank you so much. Great. Fantastic.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Education and Empowerment Podcast. This show is brought to you by Forstay, a SaaS-enabled online booking marketplace for student and intern housing. Learn more at www.forstay.com.